Hi everyone, long time no see. I am finally making my how to make your own starter from scratch video. I know it's been long overdue, and as some of you may know, I have recently lost my starter that has been in cultivation for over a year now, and I was pretty devastated because, in a way, it had some sentimental value because it's what really got me very deep into baking, and it's what made me take baking very seriously. I became a bread person after consuming a sourdough bread. Sourdough bread is probably the only bread I can consume by itself. I have been obsessed since making my very first sourdough bread, even though I started with a lot of failures. But don't let this discourage you or make you feel intimidated. I got very deep into it, very obsessive. If you see my Facebook news feed, it's literally sourdough groups and plant groups. I guess we should talk about what is a sourdough starter. If you're new to the sourdough world, a sourdough starter is a natural leavening agent for your bread. A leavening agent means it's what gives rise to your dough, so it's nice and fluffy and it's not pancake flat. It is also responsible for giving very complex flavors to your bread. And as the name suggests, sourdough, it gives your starter is what's responsible for the sourness to your bread, which may or may not be an acquired taste. But the thing is, you can manipulate how sour it is the more you learn about your ingredients and what a starter is and how to bake a sourdough bread. To make your own sourdough starter, you only need two ingredients, which most households carry: flour and water. What we're essentially doing is we're taking the natural yeast in the flour and we're cultivating it. We're increasing the colonies, we're multiplying them so that you have a culture that's essentially your pet that will give you very yummy breads. The yeast in your starter will form a symbiotic relationship with lactic acid bacteria, and this lactic acid bacteria is responsible for producing several organic acids in your bread, including lactic acid and acetic acid, among other things. And these acids are what gives that slight sourness to your bread. So, a symbiotic relationship means these microorganisms both benefit from one another, and it creates some sort of balance where whatever leftover the other one has, the other one metabolizes what other the leftover the other one metabolizes, etc., etc. They create an environment where other microorganisms won't necessarily thrive in. If you're taking care of your starter, and if your culture is very happy, other pathogens and microorganisms shouldn't be able to thrive in that environment because of pH levels and other amongst other things. So you shouldn't see mold, okay? Please take note of that. You shouldn't see mold. Everyone knows what mold looks like. Sometimes it will be fuzzy. If you see it, dump the whole thing, okay? This unit creates very beautiful breads, and it's a live Tamagotchi if you think about it. You're just giving it sustenance to keep itself alive. So that's what a starter is. Yeast release carbon dioxide from consuming sugars, aka carbohydrates, and that's what gives rise to your dough. That's a little science background. There are several benefits with consuming sourdough bread. Number one being that it is very delicious. It really doesn't compare to commercial bread. And I know that's a given because it is homemade, but a sourdough bread to me has a deeper and more complex flavor than commercial yeast bread. It has a lower glycemic index compared to other breads because of the way it is fermented. So this means that your blood sugar level won't spike up super fast and super high upon consuming it. It is also a bit more forgiving for people with a slight or mild gluten sensitivity or intolerance, just because the gluten gets broken down into amino acids during the long fermentation time. So I've actually sold a bread of mine to a friend with a slight gluten sensitivity, and she told me that it didn't upset her stomach at all, which was a relief to hear. It is also very good for your gut due to the probiotics, and also very nutritious for you. Whenever I ate this in the morning, I found myself very satisfied for a lot longer throughout the day, and I have a lot more energy than usual, and I don't feel as hungry as quickly as I normally do. Now that we have all our tools and ingredients, let's get started. The first thing you have to do is weigh your glass vessel. Make sure you press the tare or 0 button before putting anything on the scale to make sure that it's zeroed out. Also, make sure that you keep a record of the empty container because you will need this for the next upcoming days for your starter. Next, tare your scale while the glass is on it, and then weigh out 25 grams of flour. You're gonna tare the scale once again to zero it out, and then weigh out 25 grams of room temperature or lukewarm water. Mix the contents until it's homogeneous and there's no more dry flour sitting around at the bottom or on the sides of the glass. It will look like oatmeal or a pancake batter. I usually add a rubber band or maybe mark with a marker to indicate where the starting point of my starter is, just to see if any activity will happen. Make sure you keep this glass in a room temperature area. Do not put it in your fridge. It is day 2 now, so it will be a bit tricky from here because we will do some basic math. Weigh out your glass with the contents inside it. This will be your total weight. Mine is 351 grams. Remember the weight of your empty glass. Now you're gonna use that amount and subtract it from your total weight. This will result in the total of what's inside your glass. We are only going to keep 12 grams of our starter, so you're gonna subtract 12 grams from the total weight of your starter. So the amount that you just found out from your previous calculation, and that's basically how much you will have to get rid of. The amount that you're taking away from your glass is called the discard. Zero out your scale and then add 24 grams or double the amount of whatever your starter is that you kept inside. So for me, since it's 12 grams, I will be adding 24 grams of flour. Tare your scale and add 24 grams, or basically the equivalent amount of flour that you added previously. So if you added 50 grams of flour, make sure you also add 50 grams of water. But in my case, I added 24 grams of flour, so I will be adding 24 grams of water. As usual, stir well and seal with the cling wrap or loosely with the lid, and mark with a rubber band the starting point, just like you did during the first day. We are now on day 3, and if you can see, mine has some bubbles and it has doubled in size in reference to the rubber band. And this means that you have activity if yours looks like mine.
It's concave from the top, it needs to be fed, it means it needs to be replenished. So we're going to do day 3 feeding. We're going to do exactly the same thing we did for day 2. We're going to measure out the total. Once again, we're going to subtract the empty glass weight by that total, and my total right now is 58 grams of starter inside the glass. Only keeping 12 grams of the starter, and we're going to be adding 25 grams of flour and 25 grams of water. Once I find out how much discard to remove, I usually tare the balance while everything is on the scale, and I remove until I get a negative of the amount that I'm supposed to get rid of. So this is an easier way to find out how much is being removed from the glass. We're going to proceed by adding 25 grams of flour, zero out the scale and add 25 grams of water.
Mix the contents thoroughly until there's no more dry flour left, and it should look like a pancake batter as it did the previous day. Cover loosely with a lid or use a cling wrap, and then use a rubber band to mark the starting point of the volume. Keep it in a room temperature space. And you will be doing the exact same thing the next day. For day 4 all through day 7 maybe, you will be doing exactly the same feeding that you did for day 2 and day 3. It's pretty repetitive, so I'm not going to show it. Make sure you feed your starter from day 4 to day 7 just to make sure that it's ready. You'll know when your starter is ready when your starter will double in size within 6 to 8 hours. It will significantly have more bubbles. If you add a bit of it in water, it will float. And if you smell it, it will have a slightly sweet, slightly sour smell. It shouldn't smell like feet or cheese anymore. So roughly this takes about 5 to 7 days. So I want to touch on certain questions that are most likely going to be asked. Number 1, do you have to feed your starter every day? You actually don't, but because your starter is new and you want to build it to be stronger and more stable, it is ideal to be a bit more consistent with it. You don't necessarily have to feed it every day, but maybe for another week you could feed it every day, once a day or once every other day. There's a feeding method that I follow now where I feed mine actually just once a week. I'll link the video down below The purpose of it is to just not have any discard and to not waste any flour because it is valuable. And I know some people don't have the time to make recipes from their discard, so it would be ideal to just not have any. Another thing I want to touch on is during this week that you're trying to build your starter, if there is a day that you forget to feed it, do not worry. Do not toss that what you've already started out. You just follow through the feeding process. So let's say you're supposed to feed it today, and then you forgot to. Don't dump what you have. The moment you remember, just do it right then and there, and then it will be fine. Okay, trust me. Microorganisms are, for the most part, very resilient. They go to sleep when you don't feed them in the cold. I've seen videos of people experimenting and not feeding their starter for months, and still they were able to make great breads with it. You want to at least bake bread once a month, once a week. I recommend you feed it on a consistent basis, but by consistent, just have a schedule, probably 2 weeks at most, once sourdough has gotten used to your starter has gotten used to a certain routine. Another question is, if you see mold, I've already touched upon this in the beginning. If you see mold, any fuzzy thing, it's not supposed to look like anything other than the flour and the water that you put in there. So it's that, but with bubbles. It shouldn't have any multiple black stuff maybe that came out of nowhere. You shouldn't have anything green and fuzzy, anything blue and fuzzy, anything white and fuzzy. Please dispose the whole thing. If you do, don't nitpick it and just take that portion off, and then it would be ideal to just start from scratch. There's another thing I want to touch on in terms of what you see inside with your starter. So there are times when you'll notice that you'll see your starter, right? And then on top you'll see this liquid. That liquid is called hooch, and it's a very clear indicator that your microorganisms, your starter, is hungry. It needs to be fed and replenished, and it's lacking what it needs to keep multiplying and survive. If you see that, don't worry. It's not toxic. That liquid is not toxic. It is actually alcohol. You can just toss out that liquid part, or you can include it with your bake, but your bake might end up tasting a little more sour than usual. So usually people just toss it out. They replenish their starter by feeding it with the flour and water. And if you don't let your starter starve for too long, you won't ever really see that. Another is, what can you do with your discard? So I suggest you take a Tupperware to collect your discard. You don't have to toss it out, and you can Google discard recipes. I highly recommend sourdough discard pancakes. Those ones are very foolproof and very easy. They make amazing pancakes, by the way. They get so fluffy and thick, like they look like those souffle pancakes, almost like that. And who doesn't really like pancakes? That's some of the questions that I had when I was starting. Another is, when it's ready, what now, right? What do you do now? So when your starter is ready, as in it's mature enough to be baked with, this means that you have enough culture in there, you have enough microorganisms in there to do work for you. That's basically what you're trying to do. If you want to know what to bake, I have my sourdough focaccia recipe. It's so easy, there's no kneading, and I honestly recommend making a focaccia before actually making the standard artisan sourdough bread, because that one requires a lot more technique, to be honest. But I recommend focaccia is very, very easy. I hope you get into the sourdough bread making cult like I did, because it's really fun. It's really fun to just create, and it's for yourself. It's very rewarding. You're actually gonna be eating what you make, right? And also, the bread is good for you. And I don't know, I've been very happy for the last almost 2 years now of baking sourdough bread. So I hope a lot of you, some of you, find this helpful. I have included timestamps for everything. So I hope that this sparks some joy in maybe trying to bake something. All right. Thank you so much for watching, and happy bread making.